felt this before, and I can't afford to cry. I got work in the morning, I got bills, I got family ties. You play with the piece of me I try not to reason with, not trying, you made it clear. Wonder why you even here. Don't you know I can't be caught up on no bullshit. I don't got the time. Don't care who you with or what you doing. I'm doing it right. Self-care, self-love, selfish. Self-care, self-love, selfish. And I want you to know that I did try my best with you. I cut off all my hoes, that was just for you. And I don't got the time. I'm doing it right. Self-love, self-care, selfish, baby. Self-love, self-care, self-care, self-love, self-care, selfish as fuck. I'm selfish as fuck right now. Right now. 'Cause a nigga ain't gon' pay all these bills. They ain't about to fly me nowhere. I just don't got the time. 'Cause y'all niggas ain't shit. Y'all niggas ain't shit, no, no. So I gotta put myself in the front. Know what I want, and I gotta be fine by myself, alone with myself, and I'm taking my time. I'm doing this right. Self-love, self-care, self-care, selfish. Self-love, self-care, selfish. 'Cause I'm selfish as fuck right now. Selfish.
Hey, Black woman, hey. Welcome to the Black Woman Vibes podcast. I am your hostess with the mostest. So let's get to toasting. VCNA. If this is your first time joining the Black Woman Vibes podcast, here is our mission statement. Black Woman Vibes focuses on empowerment through resourceful, informative guests, data-driven podcast topics, and exclusive subscription services that promote a shared experience of Black Woman Vibes. On today's podcast episode, we will be discussing the twisted and diabolical nature of the narcissistic mother and her son. And as per usual, we have been doing with the last couple of podcast episodes, we will be tying in the messages and the psychology and the spiritual essence of how these two work hand in hand for each other's destruction, as well as how they work hand in hand to cover for each other. As the old street saying goes, the left hand washes the right hand and they both wash each other. So let's just jump right into this episode. I'm going to put a warning out there. There will be some triggering conversations going on within this podcast episode. There will be things that might snatch you up a little bit, might make your heart jump, as well as I can tell this podcast episode from the jump will be a two-parter. So definitely stay tuned for that. But let me not hold you to it. Let's just jump right into this podcast episode. So we're going to start off per usual with an article from Psychology Today. And it's a fairly recent article. It was written in 2020 in regards to narcissistic mothers and their relationships primarily with their sons. Now, I kind of went over and touched upon this dynamic within Black households in regards to Black mothers and their relationship with their sons. I kind of touched upon it within that 3-parter series on my YouTube channel, BlackWomanVibes. And the title is a little bit provocative, a little bit controversial, but it is what it is. And the title of those 3 videos are called Black Women Can't Raise Decent Sons. And that wasn't too long ago either. That was also in 2020. And we discussed and we really pulled out the layers, the shadow, the mentality, the vulnerable narcissism of it all, the coddling, the misogyny. We really dissected all of what is that twisted, weird dynamic with Black women and their sons, and how that ends up reflecting not only on the Black population in general, but how young Black women and young Black girls get hit in the crossfires because A, they don't understand the dynamic that they're witnessing, as well as they tend to be the ones who get hit in the crossfires, right? They tend to be the ones who end up being used and abused, baby mamas, sexual assault victims, scapegoats and so on and so forth by these toxic males raised by their deviant mothers. So if you would like more information in regards to how this displays within Black households, I would suggest to watch those 3-parter videos. But let's get into this article in particular, Psychology Today. And the title is Sons of Narcissistic Mothers: How Narcissistic Mothers Manipulate and Damage Their Sons. And this article is written by Darlene Lancer, and it was written on March 4th, 2020. All children of narcissists suffer. Sons of narcissistic mothers suffer damage to their autonomy, self-worth, and future relationships with women. Narcissists lack empathy and the ability to nurture their children. They don't see themselves as individuals, but extensions of themselves. Their children's feelings and needs are neglected and criticized, while their own take precedence. Narcissists feel entitled and insist on getting their way. They exact compliance through control, manipulation, guilt, and shame. It's their way or the highway. And if you don't oblige, they punish you with attacks, coldness, or withholding. Insecurity drives their insatiable, unrealistic needs for high regard and admiration. They take offense easily, triggering contempt and rage because they lack boundaries. They protect, they shame and blame others for their own emotional discomfort, which they can't tolerate. So this sounds like someone who already has their chakras misaligned. This seems like someone who hasn't had their 8 developmental stages met. They're still dealing with their own trauma, their own shadow. And instead of dealing with that properly, they project it onto their children, because oftentimes narcissistic parents, and in this case, because we're talking about narcissistic mothers, there's a lot of intimacy that was either crossed as a child or wasn't given to these mothers as a child. For example, maybe they come from households where sexual abuse is normalized, or they come from a household where the mother wasn't as caring, wasn't as giving. This mother was either out in these streets, or the mother was more concerned with her own personal needs getting met. Maybe she was like a black widow, so to speak. So she was chasing the money, chasing the bag, chasing the male gaze, dick hungry, dick thirsty, dick chasing, and she left her children to fend their own. There's multiple reasons as to why this displays. And in particular, in Black households, there's a lot of shadow side baggage and a lot of psychological hangups as to why certain traits like this displays. But this is very indeed the nature of the devouring mother. And the devouring mother is a concept that Carl Jung, a well-known and well-admired psychologist of the 20th century, and he coined the term the devouring mother. And this is kind of what the synopsis of a devouring mother is. The devouring mother is one of 4 aspects of the mother archetype identified by psychoanalyst Dr. Carl Jung. The archetype is one of a mother archetype who selfishly loves her children rather than selflessly, as would be better for them. She does so out of a sense of quote unquote protecting them from the real world, when in actuality, she wants to smother them. She wants to conform them to her own whim. She wants to control them. She wants to have many puppeteers, and she wants to be the puppet master. It's giving you dichotomy of the runner chaser complex, right? It's giving you dichotomy of like, I want to control you. I want to use that essence, that moon essence, right? We have moon magic if you're into tarot spirituality, right? That's when we manifest, that's when we release. And actually, as I'm recording this episode, the new moon is actually today. So it kind of ties into everything, that mother energy, the moon. So as the moon has pull over the tides, right? Mothers also have pull over their children. You cannot use your 5 senses in regards to the gravitational pull that the moon has over the tides, but there's a connection. Same way as mothers have pull over their children because she births them, because the child is carrying her DNA, because the child and the mother, they are both interconnected, right? Not just by the umbilical cord, but as soon as the child leaves her body, the child comes back onto her body for nourishment through her breast milk. So mothers know the buttons and the emotions and the things that they can tap into to get a certain reaction out of their children. We see that early on in development, in that trust versus mistrust stage, where they have done studies of seeing how infants react to their mothers or their caregiver, their guardians ignoring them, right? Children will go into fits if their parent, particularly the mother, ignores them. Or if the mother shows more care or more liking to another child, it's a natural emotion for a baby to feel insecure. Hence why this is the stage called the trust versus mistrust stages, the first earliest stages of our lives. Infancy, right? So oftentimes these mothers start early in manipulating their children, and they don't stop manipulating their children because they can't control anything else in their lives. To some degree, there's something off, whether it's their relationships, their money, their psychology, something's off. But the only thing that they know they can't control is that child, because in her mind, that child is an extension of her. That's my child. I'm the mother. This belongs to me. That's my property. As opposed to, I am a conduit to bringing you into this world, but I don't claim you. You are of me, but I am not the ownership of you. If you've been a follower of the Black Woman Vibes podcast, you know in season 2, episode 4, we had the episode titled, I own you, you owe me. And we kind of tapped into that narcissistic mother element where a lot of parents, in particular in this topic, narcissistic mothers, they feel like they own said child, and that child owes that mother their whole entire existence because they brought that child into the world. So that child cannot live, cannot do, cannot be outside of the approval of said mother because that child belongs to the mother, and that child is not of the mother, did not come through the mother, but is a property of the mother. In a sense of hierarchy of needs, this is starting very early, setting the foundation of that mother energy is the same thing as food, water, breathing, sex, sleep, homeostasis, clothing, depending on culture and environment. So they're saying that mother's love, that's narcissistic mothers already putting and implanting into the child's mind that their love, their attention, their affection is the same thing as their physiological need, which is not true, which will hinder them when it comes to love and belonging in the future, as well as esteem and self-actualization, because that child will not be able to see themselves outside of the shadow of their mother. It's getting very deep. If you want an example, this is reminiscence of the movie Carrie, where the mother was a religious zealot and the mother shamed Carrie just for existing. Carrie had her menstrual cycle and the mother was like, you whore, as if it's not a natural process for all girls to go through menstrual cycle, as if she's not going through a menstrual cycle. But in her mind, the woman's body, the woman's essence, just being a woman was a default Jezebel, was a default karmic, was a default bad thing, and she made her daughter feel like a bad thing for existing. On top of that, her daughter was already bullied in school, so that low vibrational energy that she input into her daughter, that carried on into her life even outside of the household, so she felt shame just for existing in her body. And that's the energy of a narcissistic mother. They devour the essence, the glow, the light, the illumination, the self-esteem of their children, because their children are not their own individual being. They are just an extension of the monster, the devouring monster, the devouring nature, the anaconda, the boa constrictor that is the mother. So again, starting at the root chakra, this is your foundation. This is your coming into the world. This is your security. This is your basic needs. The root chakra, it's already distorted. So setting the child up from the giddy up to have a distorted way of seeing themselves, the world, their attachment styles, just because the narcissistic mother refuses to set boundaries and self-reflect on themselves. Dynamics between sons and narcissistic mothers. Narcissism varies in degree and kind, and with each individual's personality and values. There are narcissistic mothers who are disinterested in their children, others who are overly involved. Some act aggressive, while others act caring or seductive, which gives you very much tease of flowers in the attic type of tease, where the mother is a little bit too flirtatious with their kid, a little bit too open with their kid. This is the parent that feels as if like they could walk naked in front of their kid. And it's a difference when the kid's a toddler and doesn't really understand anything, but it's definitely a violation of boundaries if the child knows what nakedness is, the child is developmentally aware, the child can speak, like the child knows their body, they know boundaries. Like it gets very much like incestuous tease, where the mother's very careless about what she does and who she does it with. This also gives me tease of mothers who, not all, but let's say for this example, are sex workers, particularly the example of Richard Pryor, whose grandmother was a madam. So she ran a brothel outside of her home, where Richard Pryor and her daughter, which was Richard Pryor's mother, lived in the brothel. And guess who was the sex worker? Richard Pryor's mother. So we have a dynamic of the grandmother is the pimp hoe archetype / mother. So she, again, I own you, you owe me, I need the rent paid, pop them legs up, right? A wet coochie in a dry purse makes no sense, pop them up. So she's pimping her own daughter in front of her grandson. And we see how Richard Pryor and his disrespect and his distorted relationship with women transpired. On top of that, it's been alleged, and I think even Richard Pryor confirmed, when he was a young child, he was sexually assaulted in an alley while coming from a store from an older neighborhood boy. You see where I'm going with this? Like the lack of boundaries, the lack of parental guidance, the lack of maturity, lack of understanding, developmental peaks being met, like it all intermingles. And this is why generational curses tend to fall through the bloodline. The following are some common patterns, though your experience may differ. Neglect. Narcissistic mothers who feel burdened by motherhood neglect their children, yet shame and criticize them, sometimes for being too needy or childlike. So this is the mother who really didn't want to be a mother. This gives me tease of a mother who probably is religious or came from a religious background. She done did some things, didn't use protection, ended up pregnant. And now she's like, I have to keep the baby. With or without the man, I'm going to keep the baby. But she kept the baby as something to keep her company, something to rule over, something to have dominion over, something that she can puppeteer over, kind of like Pinocchio. I'm a real boy now. She thought that the child was going to give her something that she didn't have for herself. And because she's the mother, she felt as if like, well, if I can't make the man stay, at least I have the child, because the child will never leave me. The child will always be by my side. The child will always be under my dominion. So that makes up for the fact that nothing else in my life can stay as consistent as I want it to be. As well as when it comes to the actual parenting part, they want no parts in that because they never planned for that. They never invested in that. That was not what they planned for. So when the child is acting like a child, they're the parent who gets very irate very quickly, has no patience, will be the first one to be like, get a switch or I'm getting the belt. They yell at their children. They talk to their children very harshly. They even criticize their children into feeling as if they are the worst thing on this planet. Or they even become very cold towards that child. Like, I don't feel like cooking. Since you hungry, cook for yourself. They may even talk to their child like, the only way I could say this just truthfully and bluntly, like a bitch off the street. They talk to their child like someone that they want to fight or someone that they want to attack. There is no motherly love in the way that even they discipline their children. Very harsh. Maybe they curse at the child. Maybe they even brutalize their child, but where it's not just discipline or corporal punishment, it's very much child abuse. They are needy themselves and can't bear their child's needs. This is the mother who feels as if like it's okay to dump all of their emotional bullshit on their children. They feel like it's okay to have adult conversation in front of their children or to their children. This is the mother who takes their child. There's usually a prize child. In Black households, we know it tends to be the son. So she'll take her son and talk about her triumphs and tribulations in dating and why the father isn't around and why she doesn't trust friends. And that's why she keeps to herself. It's very much drama, trauma, making her children the emotional baggage carrier, making her children her therapist, not creating boundaries and understanding that a child stays in a child's place, that these conversations you reserve for other adults or you reserve them for therapy, but not for children, because again, in their distorted narcissistic minds, they do not have boundaries, and that child is not a child. It's an extension of them. It's their property. So they don't have to treat the child like a child. They can treat the child like one of their homegirls. They can treat their child like one of their boyfriends. They can treat the child like one of their associates. instead of understanding that that's not what the child is here for. But then again, oftentimes narcissistic parents do not plan for the child. The child's here, so they decide, all right, I'm going to keep it, and then I'm going to make that child responsible for my happiness, responsible for my growth, responsible for my burdens, responsible for making me feel good. Instead of realizing that once you have a child, your life is not necessarily put to a halt, but your first and foremost priority is that child. So all of your junk and your shadow needs to either be resolved before you have a child or resolved while you're raising that child, i.e. you go to therapy and you don't make that child responsible for your fuck shit. But again, narcissists have a really hard time realizing themselves, seeing their shadows, seeing their bad behaviors, their bad traits. And it's usually blamed and excused or written off as not their fault or someone else's fault, because they refuse to take accountability for themselves, how they act, and the consequences, the natural consequences of their behaviors. They might demand that their young child be a man or favor one child and demonstrably ignore or belittle another. So this is giving us seeds of like the golden calf versus the black sheep. Oftentimes, narcissistic mothers will pinpoint a particular child and use that child as their greatest love, their greatest accomplishment, their muse, and the other children, for whatever reason, are the children who are dismissed or they have angst against, or the children that they make the Cinderella complex. So they're here to cook and clean and this, that, and the third. But there's that one child, or it could even be genders, because we know in Black homes, the prize tends to be the son, and the envy, the source of envy and hatred tends to be the daughters. So it might be a dynamic like that where the mother is like, oh, I love my sons, I nurture my sons, not my sons, sons. But the daughters, oh, you little thought, oh, you hot in the pants, oh, if you think you grown, get out my house, you smelling yourself, who you think you talking to? The vitriol is towards the daughter, but the incestuous behavior is towards the son. Both are toxic, because even if you reverse the dynamics, it would still be toxic. But it's to create this reality, this disdain against each other, this parental vibe where, and this happens in households where the children are parentalized as well, one child or a group of children are treated horribly, while one child or a few of the children are treated as the prize. This is to create some type of distinction and disdain against the children, vying for the mother so she can reaffirm her position as the prize, as the virtuous golden mother of the year, because she has her children vying for her attention. Instead of she giving her attention freely to her children, she makes her children yearn and beg and fall out over her, for war against each other, backstab each other, Five of Swords type of energy, Five of Wands type of energy, so she can feel like an empress. It gives you mean girl tease, right? The mean girl feels as if she's somebody, she's worthy, she's that chick, when she can make other people feel horrible. And someone who has high esteem would not need to make other people feel trash to make her feel like she's the prize. You would be the prize in any dynamic. But mean girls and people with that mean-spirited, insecure, and fragile ego, fragile sense of self only feel worthy when everybody else feels unworthy. So this ties into creating an environment where it's shame versus doubt, as well as initiative versus guilt. With the shame and doubt with the young child, they feel as if everything that they do, it has to be on pins and needles, because whatever reaction that the narcissist will have, and a narcissist is unpredictable as well. Sometimes the things that you do, they love it. The same thing that you do, they hate it. So they're very temperamental. So the child has to be temperamental in what they do and how they express themselves. They have to put their narcissistic mothers' feelings above their own feelings and their own desires and their own thoughts because they have to match the energy of their parent rather than the parent being temperamental in regards to the child, because the child might have a freak blowout, the child might be happy, the child might be sad, whatever the case may be. As a parent, you need to be ready to be able to love and give that safety to allow the child to feel and do. But now the child puts themselves in a parentalized position. Now they're worried about their parents' emotions and their parents' thoughts and feelings versus just freely being themselves. And initiative versus guilt, the child learns that they cannot take initiative, that they cannot do what they want to do, that they have to conform, they have to restrict themselves. They need to be more palatable, because if they're not more palatable to this narcissistic mother, they will be shunned, they will be outcast, they will not be loved, that they will get a cold shoulder. And again, children are very susceptible. Children are desiring their mothers and their parents and their community at large favor. Children are very naive. Initiative versus guilt, preschool years, right? So when your caregiver, your mother, your primary caregiver is giving you the cold shoulder or they're ignoring you, that instinctively makes a child insecure and desire that attention more. Again, as I said in the beginning of the podcast episode, the study in regards to the experiment of seeing how children take being neglected, not for long periods of time, like it's for a couple of minutes, like 10, 20 minutes. And they visibly study the child's nonverbals and verbal cues of how the child reacts and throw fits, because children, especially at that young age where they're very dependent, they're very vulnerable, and they need their parents, they need parental guidance to help them survive. If they are getting ignored, it instinctively triggers something within them, because they know without mommy's love, without mommy's guidance, without any type of affection being shown, I'm on my own. And I can't survive on my own as a 3-month-old. I can't survive on my own as a 2-year-old. Correct? And as a child goes into these different stages, industry versus inferiority, which is early school years, that indoctrination of feeling low, feeling insecure, feeling as if they have to chase people's gaze starts coding itself in this child's personality. So now as they grow and develop in these different stages of life, they are very much susceptible to being doormats, very susceptible to being used and discarded and being bullied and being picked upon and being a follower. You see how all of these things build upon each other? In regards to hierarchy of needs, there isn't any safety because the child is not secure within themselves and secure in regards to the relationship between them and their mother. So because they're children, there would be nothing in regards to job security, but their health depends on it. If their parent is temperamental and the parent is not involved, they do not care about the child. If they get a cough, they have to figure out how can they heal themselves. They got to figure out how to take their medicine and how to, gives you very much Matilda tease. You're responsible for your own upbringing. You're responsible for taking care of yourself because your parent has tapped out. Your parent never really had an idea or a desire to raise you. So now you're stuck raising yourself, correct? So you have to gather resources. So this might be the child who steals at the store because they understand that their mother's not going to worry about if they have lunch or if they don't have lunch. This is the child who may be a liar, maybe covering up for the mother. So why didn't your mother come to parent-teacher night? Oh, she was working. And in reality, the child knows the mother was at home. The mother just didn't care to show up because the mother never cares to show up. This is the child who has to create some illusion of functionality. This is the child who is a quote-unquote responsible child. Going back into the episode in regards to parentalized and the 8 stages of development. It was a 2-parter. Season 3, episode 8, and season 3, episode 9. Both of them in regards to parentalized and the 8 stages of development. So if you would like to show your gratitude via donation, you can always hit me up either on Cash App, $BlackWomanVibes, or Venmo, BlackWomanVibes, woman with an A,
not an E, because it's only me, she, her, we. Now back to your regular scheduled broadcast, and I hope you enjoy.
So this is a child who's covering up and taking on parental adult responsibilities because they know that the parent is lacking in some way, shape, or form. Or this is the child who's like, well, if my parents don't care, then I don't care. So I'll show up to school when I feel like showing up to school. I'll do my homework if I'm forced to do my homework. This is the child who very much is a latchkey kid. They figure things out on their own if they want to figure it out, because they know that the cards that they were dealt with, the parents that they have, in particular, this narcissistic mother, either doesn't care or this parent mother is too overly involved. So this even gets you tiger mother tease, where she's always breathing down this child's neck because she thinks she can get another life force, another chance in raising this child. So everything that she never was, everything that she never accomplished, everything that she never could do, now this child is responsible for doing it. So now the child has to get straight A's. This child has to be a pianist. This child has to learn 5 languages. Now this child is her living muse, her living puppet, and this child can never really speak their truth or be their true selves. So they're smothering this child under the guise of, I just want the best for you, when in reality, that narcissistic mother just wants to live vicariously through that child, which obviously is going to affect them later on in developing other skills such as the love and belonging needs, self-esteem, self-actualization, and so on and so forth. In regards to the chakra points, at this stage, this child's root chakra is already blown, is already distorted, is already imbalanced, and the sacral chakra is too. So this child is only creating and only values themselves through the mother. So they see themselves again as an extension of their mother. Everything is what my mother would want and what my mother thinks. And perhaps at this stage, adults, even like teachers and professionals, may look at it like, oh, they're just such a good, well-mannered child. This child, is raised right. This child is this, that, and the third. Not understanding that the reason why this child is this way, perhaps they really are truly well-mannered, but it's really because of the psychological programming of the mother being a narcissistic mother. This mother is telling the child how to be and how to think and how to express themselves. So they are just basically a robot. They are no different than being brainwashed or in a cult, because they don't know their true identity outside of what my mother thinks, what my mother said. They have no identity. They have no free will. There might be things that they like that their parent may not like. Maybe they want to be a drummist. They want to play the drums, but they know their mother hates the sound of drums. So they say, no, I don't like drums. I only like classical music. And then behind the scenes, maybe at school or maybe when they're talking to their friends, they're on the tablet, playing drums on some app, because they feel as if they have to Jekyll and hide their identity because their parent won't accept them from who they actually are. And let's not even get into if the child ends up being a homosexual or the child ends up deviating from what the expectation is, or the child says they don't want to follow said religion. Then it's chaos. Then it's World War III, because again, that child was never here to be their authentic self. That child was here to fit a mold, to fit a role inside of this narcissistic mother's delusions. So the child has to placate into the mother's desire, and that child never really has their own self-worth, and that child doesn't tap into their creativity, their childlike passion. They're very much an empty vessel, there to be filled by their narcissistic mother's temperamental, psychotic, narcissistic gaze, which also fits into the solar plexus chakra, because that child eventually is not going to have a healthy self-esteem, a healthy personality. They're going to be a child who really doesn't know themselves and is very susceptible, like I said, to being preyed upon by other people within the community, because their parents never had proper boundaries to begin with. So how can this child turn into a, let's say, young adult, and they know the difference between a predatory relationship in quotations versus a healthy and whole relationship? They're going to look at a healthy and whole relationship as something totally foreign, but someone who is abusive, someone who is manipulative, someone who is prone to beating their partner into submission. They're going to look at that and say, that seems about right. Or even on a subconscious level, it might be they gravitate to these type of people because it's familiar, because that mirrors the script that they were raised on, because that's exactly how their narcissistic mother treated them. Or they're attracted to partners who are emotionally unavailable. So they're the chaser, the partner's the runner, and it's that avoidant versus anxious attachment style. They like people who are not there for them. They desire to chase the gaze of people who are cheating, creating third-party relationships, breadcrumbing, lying, manipulating. A person who wants this child who's going to grow up and embody that type of energy to chase their gaze. They want this child who's going to embody this type of energy when they become an adult to break their own personal boundaries. So let's say this child who's now a fully grown adult, they don't believe in, let's say, I don't know, engaging sexually with their intimate partner and other people. But their intimate partner's like, look, if you don't do that, I'm just going to get someone else who does. You're not the only one. You're an ugly bitch anyways. This and the third. Since that child who is now a grown adult in this example is used to and accustomed to people impeding on their boundaries, telling them that they are unworthy, telling them that they should do better and nothing that they do is good enough. Next thing you know, this person is putting themselves in jeopardy of not only opening themselves up to predatory people, but opening themselves up to unwanted pregnancies and STDs and emotional and psychological hangups, because it reaffirms the negative script that their narcissistic mother implanted in them early in their lives. Enmeshment. Instead of neglect, narcissistic mothers are enmeshed. They use their children for their narcissistic supply. Although a mother may appear independent, she may be emotionally needy and foster mutual dependency with her son through adoring and controlling behavior. She might depend on her son to support her emotionally, listening to her, be a companion, or attend to her physical needs and responsibilities. When he's an adult, she might rely on him to make decisions and manage her affairs and finances. So again, this mother is very incestuous. If not sexually, and hopefully not sexually, it's psychologically, it's emotionally. Again, she crosses those boundaries. She treats her son like her boyfriend, like her friend, like her associate. And she puts a lot of her business out there to her son because she does not see her son as her child. She sees her son as a pseudo mate. She sees her son as her significant other, or can be used in the fashion of a significant other. She tries to validate this weird attachment style with her son. This is also a mother who tends to be very jealous when her son does branch off from her and does get into relationships and does seek female companionship outside of the mother. This is the mother who is saying, you can't trust these hoes. These hoes are fast. They're going to try to trap you with a baby. They only want you for your money. No one's going to do you like mother. They're very jealous. They're very internalized misogyny. They have that within them. So they see other women, especially younger women, as competition. They see younger women as something that they have something that she no longer has, which is time, youth, and fertility. So they become the distorted crone and they jump on that. They minimize her. They discard her. They try to sneak diss her, shade her. We see this in shows like Everybody Loves Raymond, the mother, and how the mother treats the wife. It's the same dynamic where the mother has to one up the next chick because that chick has the gaze of her son. She's competing like the main chick versus the side chick because in her mind, that's her son. And how dare you come and take her son, her property? Psychologically and emotionally, she's just too enmeshed. She's just too attached to her son, and it's not healthy. It's very incestuous. And then she handicaps her son because her son feels as if he feels guilty for living his life. He feels guilty for wanting healthy relationships with women who are not his mother. He feels guilty for desiring other women and not wanting to fulfill the role of being responsible for his mother's happiness, listening to his mother's hangups, psychologically coddling his mother, figuring out her affairs, figuring out her financial needs. He wants to be his own independent person, but he cannot because he feels like he is liable, he is responsible, he is in debt to his mother, and that mother uses her emotions and uses that mother energy, that mother pull, like I was talking about, the moon and the tides of gravitational pull. The mother uses that emotional connectedness to her child, so the child will feel that it is his duty, it is his obligation to forsake everybody else and put his mother first and foremost in his life. Even when he's married, even when he has kids, even when he's dating someone else, his life's work, his purpose is to put his mother and her baggage on his back. And again, this ties into this child who's going to turn into an adult to be in that adolescence identity versus confusion, where they want to branch off and be their own person. They want to have their own thoughts and desires and philosophies, and they want to explore, they want to expand, but that narcissistic devouring mother will not allow him to do so. So he's going to be in the confusion stage. He's going to feel inferior. He's going to be guilty or feel guilty. He's going to have doubt. He's going to have mistrust of himself and other people because the mother told him that he can't think for himself. And not only can he not think for himself, that she needs to be responsible for his decisions in life, as well as he is responsible for her overall life's growth, life's purpose, life's happiness, and so on and so forth. So when he does try to have love and belonging needs in friendship and intimacy and platonic and romantic and sexual relationships, he's in and out. He's a flighty. He's that Knight of Wands energy, where it's very much breadcrumbing, where it's very much, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. Very much of like that Six of Wands in reverse, clout chasing, pleasure seeker, pleasure pleaser. Very much I bet him, I F him and dismiss him, because not only is he emotionally tied to his mother, but he finds relationships as toxic. He finds relationships as draining. So when he gets into a relationship, he thinks that he's signing up for a second devouring mother. He's signing up for a second narcissistic mother, that anything that seems like commitment and anything that seems like a healthy relationship through his distorted lens, he thinks that's another variation of his mother. And since he's still engrossed in his mother's energy, he's still being stagnant and smothered to death by his narcissistic mother's energy. He can't possibly see a relationship, even as healthy as it could be, as something that's reciprocal and something that has boundaries, because that's not the way that he was raised and that's not the way he sees relationships. So when he sees relationships, whether it's platonic or intimacy, he's trying to see what he can get from it, because that's exactly the way that his mother portrayed relationships to be. His mother portrayed relationships to be transactional, to be one-sided, to be self-fulfilling. So when he gets into relationships, whether intimate or platonic, he sees them as, what can I get out of them? And at that age, typically they're looking for someone to give them sex, to give them shelter, and to give them money. So that's where the misogyny seeps in, on top of the misogyny he already internalized by his mother, feeling insecure and jealous of younger women. So now he sees women as something to conquer in bed and something to use. So when he sees women that he's interested in, he puts on the mask of being chivalrous, of being a gentleman, of being emotionally available, of being honest and reciprocal, until he sees that woman has sunk and took the bait. Then all of a sudden, mask off. Now I'm breadcrumbing you. I'm leaving you on red. I'm not being consistent. I say things that I'm not going to follow through with. I might dump a baby in you and abandon you. I might only come when I want sex. It's all of that narcissistic, toxic energy, but they were raised with that energy via the mother. So they are just repeating. It's wash, rinse, and repeat cycle that they learned from their mothers. They are just the male version of their mothers. And again, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, it's the young women and the young girls who get hit in the crossfires because they don't understand the dynamic that they're witnessing. And they kind of understand it when they become victims of the dynamic, but they don't understand it in totality because it's like, yes, the relationship between the son and the mother is weird, it's toxic, it's too clingy. However, the psychological, the way I'm peeling it back, they don't understand it on that level as to why it transpires the way that it does until they see everything that this man said he was gonna do and he was trying to do and he promised that he would. He never did. But what he was consistent with was with the manipulation, the gaslighting, the flying monkeys, the lies, the sex that he wanted from the woman, the child that he implanted and left the woman to raise, the money that he took and never gave back, the broken dreams, the broken promises, consistently inconsistent energy, just like his narcissistic mother. Because his self-esteem, his self-worth, his self-love, his self-respect, his confidence, his achievement, his overcoming challenges is shallow. That's why he wants respect from others and the community at large, but he does not have it for other people. He cannot tell the community that he wants X, Y, and Z, but he doesn't invest in the community. He takes from the community. He robs the community. He rapes the community. He pillages from the community, but then have the nerve to tell the community this is what he wants. This is the laundry list that he wants, like he's a child. Christmas Eve sitting on Santa's lap. That's not how things work. But in the distorted and karmic brain of a narcissist, of course, up can be down, down could be up, wrong could be right, right is always wrong, and so on and so forth. Nothing makes sense, but this confusion is what the narcissist lives in, and this is the energy that they embody in. So everything that they show, even the beginning stages of the love bombing where everything seems right and everything seems lovely and this seems like Prince Charming, not only is it a mask, but it's very shallow. It's not something that even exists. This is just an energy that he's embodying to trap these women into thinking that he's this way, but he's really that way. He has no real self-worth. He has no real security within self. He doesn't have self-respect, self-love, self-worth. So everything that he's projecting and treating onto other women is really how he feels about himself, because everything starts with intention and everything starts with a vibration. So if he is sending that out to other women and children and this, that, and the third within the community at large, trust and believe me, he never had it within self to begin with. So he's mirroring, projecting that out onto the larger society at large because he doesn't have it within self. That mirror, that fake mask is what he thinks people want. So he embodies that energy and then projects it onto society. So when society buys into the image and he feels as if the foundation is set, the root chakra is set, the physiological needs have been met, then he rips off the mask and shows the society the true self, where he doesn't have the self-worth, where he's not that charming, where he's not that self-secure, where he has no self-respect, where he doesn't have confidence. He hasn't achieved anything but a trail of broken dreams, broken marriages, broken relationships, children without father. He hasn't overcame any childhood baggages because he's still dealing with his trauma dramas. He's still dealing with the wounded warrior. He's still trying to escape his own bullshit and projecting it onto people. And he doesn't have respect for society because he sees society as a sucker. He sees society as things that he can manipulate and take things from. The same way that his mother felt that having him was a way for her to get her needs met, and the child doesn't even exist because the child wasn't there for her to give. The child was there for him to give to her. So again, the root chakra is off, the sacral chakra is off, the solar plexus is obviously off, and then the heart chakra as well. So it's a distorted heart chakra. It gives you, if this was a girl, this would give you tease of fuck you, pay me, give me everything you want for this wet ass pussy. But as a male, it's the same thing too. It's very much, I'll pretend to be chivalrous. It gives you that future tease, right? I love my baby mamas, exactly how we saw him with Sierra. They were supposed to be a nice couple. They were supposed to be young and budding and fruitful. Soon as Sierra got pregnant, mask off. Oh, well, I'm messing with other women. I don't think I want to be married. I can get my bitch back. Whoa. It's all the disrespectful shadow, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde energy that you did not see. Now that the facade is off and the facade can't be mistaken, or the facade can't be taken back, it's no longer illusionary. It's very visual that this person isn't who they say they are. Now it's like, all right, well, I'm going to just put all my bullshit out there. I'm going to show you all my scorpionic dark energy. I'm going to show you all my Pluto energy, all of my disdain and disgust and misogyny and sexism and chauvinism and fuckboy isms, because there's no need to hide it, because now I got you hooked so deep, you're either going to accept it or you're not going to accept it. And if you don't accept it, I'm just going to find someone else who is going to accept it, or someone else to play so they can accept it until they no longer want it. Then I move on to the next. So are you going to take it or are you not going to take it? And they're hoping that you become a Tiny, like Tiny Harris is to T.I., so he can continue being diabolical and a predator and a liar and deceiver and so on and so forth, hoping that you'll either play a role like Tiny, or he'll go out and continue doing the same old script, fixing where the mask maybe have been fragmented or broken. So reaffirming and fixing those easy detections of the false mask. So the next time he does it, maybe it won't be 15 minutes of ecstasy. Maybe he can stretch it out to maybe 25 minutes. And maybe he won't be so eager to be an F-boy. Maybe he'll take his time slower so the mask will stay longer so he can get more out of the woman. So he'll just find a ways to perfect the scheme and the scam better. Above all, she uses and exploits her son to supply her with attention, admiration, and to fill her wants and needs. She makes him feel loved, important, and valued, reinforcing his dependency. However, it's only at her pleasure. Hence, her over-involvement with her son can camouflage her toxic parenting. We see this all the time, do we not? With the Lil Scrappies and Mama D's, with the Waka Flockas and the Miss Debs, and so on and so forth. If you see it on a face first value, you see that as, okay, overprotecting, okay, mother tiger energy, but it doesn't take too long to see like, no, it's not just that she's overbearing, which is still toxic. But it's the fact that she literally thinks in her mind, her son is her boyfriend. Her son is her property, that her son belongs to her. And again, these women tend to be very jealous, very critical, and very misogynistic towards the baby mama or the girlfriend or the fiance, the wife, the whatever that their sons are intimately engaged with, because in this distorted narcissistic mother's mind, that's her son, and how dare you think you're going to come into their relationship and be the side chick to what they got going on. And that distorted mind of theirs, that's exactly how they play out this dichotomy. And they create contention, they create a negative energy, they create chaos energy for the other woman to leave her son, so then she can come back into the relationship and say, you know what, I knew she wasn't good for you, I knew she couldn't do what mama can do, the only person who's going to love you is mama. She could have never competed. She never knew where we came from. She doesn't know our culture, whatever the case may be. She reaffirms her position by pushing off other women, because in her twisted mind, she's the main chick. She's the queen bee, and no other woman can compare. All her son needs is her. They could be together for the rest of their lives. They don't need anybody else. Just me and my son. Me and my mama. Mama, I love mama. Mama, 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 mama. Mama! In my Oscar Proud voice. And that's exactly how the mother would like it. And honestly, in the distorted mind of these sons of narcissistic mothers, they don't see an issue with that either. because their dependency is off their mother, whether it's financial, whether it's emotional, whether it's psychological. They are dependent on their mother in some way, shape, or form. And the mother likes it that way. She does not want the son to be independent. She does not want the son to go away and live his life, because if that's the case, then who does she get to have dominion over? If he's independent and living his life, then she's alone to deal with her own bullshit, and that's not what she wants to do. That's not the point of her having a child. Her point of having a child was having someone to have dominion over. If he's independent, then who can she rule over? No one. And then she would have to face and deal with herself. And that's the last thing the narcissist wants to do. So she's okay with her child being a fuckboy. And that's why she'll make excuses for him being a fuckboy. That's why she has no problem saying, oh, it's the women chasing my son for his money. That's the women trapping babies on him. Not seeing clearly, acknowledging and holding her son accountable for being sloppy with his penis, for not using condoms, for taking advantage of women. She doesn't even like women. So why would she take up for women that she doesn't even like? Why would she put the responsibility on her son's back when in actuality, she feels as if it's everybody else's fault and never hers? So of course it's never her son's either, since the son is an extension of her. She's innocent, and so is her son's innocent. And the son is so innocent that whatever he does, she will cop pleas for him. Whatever he does, she will make sure that he is getting an escape out of jail free card, so he can continue being dependent on her, continue needing her, and continue looking for her as his alibi, so he will always stay clear and stay near towards his mother. There's usually a high price to pay for his attempts at autonomy. Through her manipulation with anger, shame, guilt, self-pity, and/or martyrdom. This is the parent who said, I did everything for you. I raised you when your father left, or your father went to prison, or your father died. I've invested so much into you. Who else would have done this? I could have left you and lived my life. I could have gave you up for adoption. I could have given an abortion, but I done worked these shitty jobs. She's acting as if she's the first mother in history who had a sacrifice. She's going to act like she's the first mother in history that had to forfeit. She's going to act like she's the first mother in history that had to do shitty jobs or had to do some strange things to put food on the table for her child. She's going to act as if it was a sacrifice, that she was a martyr, as if she had no choice in getting pregnant, no choice, and if she wanted to keep the child, no choice in regards to everything, to keep her being innocent and being seen as a victim, and making the responsibility to uphold her and to cater to her and to validate her the responsibility of her son. So to continue that codependency energy that the son has on the mother. He learns to put her wishes and needs first and feels obligated to do so, because that's the end goal for the narcissistic mother. Idealization and criticism. Many narcissistic mothers idealize their young son. They build his confidence and sense of importance as he matures and challenges her control, because that's what all children do. The rebellious teenage years, all children will try to test the boundaries and be independent and try to figure out what this thing called life is. That doesn't mean that you allow them to do whatever the hell they want to, but this also doesn't mean that you stagnate them. You give them freedom and you give them liberty and you expand the boundaries, but it is slowly but surely type of a process, not just go crazy. And it's not just, I still want you to be in Pampers even though you're 16. She disparages his emerging individuality and tries to correct and change him to boost her ego. She may brag about her son to her friends, but is critical at home. So that's that Jekyll and Hyde energy, right? Oh, my son, he's so talented. Oh, he plays basketball. He's so creative. Oh, he's a ladies' man. He goes to church. Ooh, he's this and the third with her friends, the family, the church, everybody. But at home, oh, you could have gotten an A+. You only got a B-. Oh, you could have gotten that 3-pointer. It was wide open. Oh, well, I don't see you practicing your Bible. You feeling to be a heathen. No heathen can live in this house. Is to keep you in an energy of confusion. It's to keep you in an energy of stagnation, to keep you dependent and codependent on her energy and her being a dictator. Because if you have too much confidence and you have too much esteem and self-worth and belonging and self-actualization, you'll realize that you're literally attached to a demon entity, and it's time for you to become independent and go. And that's her worst nightmare as a narcissistic mother, for her sons or children in general to be independent, to live on their own, to think on their own, to do on their own, because who else is she going to attach her tentacles onto and suck the life out of? Who else is she going to energy harvest and use as her supply as a narcissist if her supply is depleted because her supply is no longer around? Because again, the child is there as an extension of her. What the child does for her instead of what she does for said child. In response, he may rebel and incur her rage or try to please her to be accepted. His fall from grace can be confusing and traumatic. It's exacerbated if another child is born. So this is when the parent, the mother, the narcissistic mother is like, well, I'm moving on. I'm getting married. I'm getting a boyfriend. You don't want to do what I told you to do anyways. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to act like you're the burden. I'm going to act like you're a rodent. I'm going to act as if like you are the worst thing that ever came into my life. I'm going to dismantle your reputation in front of my friends and family. I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to make people isolated from you. I'm going to ignore you. I'm going to shade you. It's like that mean girl energy. I'm going to make people turn on you. I'm going to make people look at you differently. I'm going to excommunicate you from the community. I'm going to isolate you. I'm going to pick at you. I'm going to shade you. I'm going to treat you insignificant because I want you to crawl on your knees and beg me for forgiveness just because you wanted to be independent, just because you wanted your own identity, just because you didn't want to be the vessel that I used as another means to have a second life to vicariously live through. And because you did not give me that opportunity to minimize you and stagnate you, now this is my revenge plot to dismiss you, to make you feel insignificant. Because the treachery you committed was choosing yourself and not choosing me, the narcissistic mother. And this is very traumatic and this is very confusing because on one end, not too long ago, you was the prized golden calf. Now you're nothing. Now you're the bane of her existence. You're the worst that has ever happened to her. She dismisses you. She bullies you. It's traumatic. Again, this is a child. The brain is still growing. The brain is still developing. And again, the gravitational pull, the moon and the ties, the mother and the child. So just like the infant, when it is ignored, when it is neglected, the child becomes very insecure and desires that energy, calling for that energy, throws fits for that energy, because the child instinctively knows if they do not have the energy, they do not have the care, they do not have the support, they do not have the love of the mother, then they have no other means of survival. Instinctively. No different than when the mother basically narcissistically discards her child, either for another child because the child is baby now, so the child is more needy on her, or she goes off and has her own relationship. And we're not talking about a mother who is now, ready to mingle, ready to date, and her child might feel insecure about that. Like, that's understandable. We're talking about a narcissistic mother who's now on some, you're my ex-man, I'm moving on to my new man type of energy. And this is in regards to her child. She already enmeshed herself in a very incestuous relationship. And now she's playing her child as if this is some ex-boyfriend that she can't stand. And not as her son. Or in some cases, it's like this with the daughter too. As with her daughter. Now she's treating the child as if she's annoyed. She's treating the child as if the child is the worst thing that's ever happened to her. Now she's treating the child as if the child is the enemy instead of the child being her child. He loses his specialness and sibling rivalry can be extreme. This is giving me Cain and Abel tease, except without that religious mumbo jumbo. But it's very much the same thing. The mother causes these children who are siblings to detest each other, to try to one up each other, because the mother has overvalued her position within her children's lives. And because she has nothing else going on, she's toxic. She's an empty vessel. She's distorted. She's fragmented. She wants her children to mimic the same energy. So if it's not a new man, then it's, oh, I have another child. You're grown enough. You're old enough. Figure it out. I got someone else who needs me. I got someone else who's checking for me. So then it's like, oh, I'm trying to make the first child become jealous of the second child so they can pit each other for my attention, vying for my attention. So they can be jealous of each other, to be contemptuous of each other, to snitch on each other, to not have a solid sibling relationship, but to see each other as the ops, to see each other as enemies. And for her, it makes her feel righteous. It makes her feel needed. It makes her feel complete. It makes her feel whole. Creating three-party relationships even within her home, her children, because that's how weak and insecure and toxic narcissistic mothers are. Triangulation. Marital relations for a narcissist lack intimacy. Therefore, a husband may avoid a narcissistic woman with work to compensate, and because she's emotionally needy, she will triangulate. Bring in a third, be it work, a lover, an addiction, or her children. She may use her son as a confidant or companion. Children are ideal subjects because they idealize their parents and can easily be controlled. So we already talked about that, how, again, she'll use a third party into the situation to validate herself, to make herself seem more important than she actually is, as well as this reaffirms her toxic relationship where she feels as if she is of high value, not because of accomplishments, not because of self-worth and self-esteem and all that jazz, because she doesn't have it. It's because she can pin two people against each other to vie for her attention, because she's insecure, she lacks intimacy, she lacks boundaries, she lacks true self-awareness, so she thinks games like this is okay, and she will justify this in her warped mind. It's worse for a son if his father is absent, rages, is violent, or has a mental or drug problem. Then, to survive, the son may seek comfort in addiction or further bond with his mother. So the son gets caught up in that Oedipal complex where now he either has some type of disdain for the father, whether he's there or he's not there. And then he feels like it's his job to become the husband for his mother. So now he puts himself in a situation where he's either trying to leave the house, whether physically or mentally, because the energy is so static, it's so chaotic, it's so stressful, or he leans into the position of like, okay, my father, your husband is not good enough for you, so I'm going to provide you that emotional need, that intimate need that my father cannot complete. So again, lacking boundaries, not allowing a child to be a child. You're putting the child in a parentalized and in an incestuous position because the narcissist refuses to see themselves, the role that they play, how dysfunctional they are, because they are fragmented. They are delusional and they are toxic. But they hide this under the guise of, I'm your mother and I care for you. So the throat chakra, she very much binds. So in intimacy versus isolation, which is young adulthood, there is no young adulthood. Instead of him seeking out other relationships, him becoming fully independent, him creating boundaries and understanding intimacy and reciprocity, he's tied in and he's enmeshed, kind of like a spider web in his own mother's fuckery and his own mother's psychopathic bullshit, because he doesn't even understand what a healthy relationship looks like, what the unhealthy relationship looks like, because oftentimes when we are children, we are told that the predator, that the villain comes at you with full force, comes at you with sharp weapons, is ugly, is toxic, it growls, it's furry, it slithers, it's big, it's tall, it's airy, it's dark, it's menacing, it's all encompassing. But sometimes things that are toxic are sweet. Sometimes things that are toxic look very simple, or they look very
safe and unsuspecting.
And it's not until we're in the grasp of it, until we're in the thick of it, and we have hindsight, because hindsight is 2020, we see how wrong it is. But that's the thing about toxic narcissistic mothers. You can't really see the toxicity of it all if you don't have the right language and the right understanding of how a narcissistic mother is able to operate. It gives you very much tease of Hansel and Gretel. It gives you tease of Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood wasn't able to differentiate between the wolf and the grandmother until the wolf became more agitated and couldn't keep to the script and tried to attack Little Red Riding Hood. And then Little Red Riding Hood noticed that, oh, Granny isn't furry. Granny doesn't have long, sharp teeth. Granny doesn't have claws. This isn't Granny. Run. Hansel and Gretel didn't know that they were being set up to be Thanksgiving meal until they realized little old Granny wasn't just getting the recipe and the ingredients ready for the pie. They were going to be the pie. Granny was going to set them up to cannibalize them. But oftentimes, as adults, as people in general, we don't see the impending danger in a person if they don't look quote unquote dangerous. Because we don't see the cues, because we think the cues is often bazookas and grizzly and the claws and the growls and this, that, and the third. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a smooth criminal. Sometimes it's a pleasant smile. Sometimes it's a longing gaze. Sometimes it smells good. The skin is soft. And yet it is toxic as all get out. Right?
As I warned y'all in the beginning that this topic was going to be a two-parter, because I do like keeping my podcast episodes around an hour, because I do want the attention to remain focused on the topic matter. So I'm going to break this podcast episode into two parts. So this was part one. Come back next week for part two, the conclusion, as well as some advice for sons of narcissistic mothers, as well as narcissistic mothers who know there is something wrong with them and are willing to face themselves in the mirror to be a better person, hold themselves accountable, and be better mothers overall. So let's get into the closing now, shall we?
In closing, thank you to the listeners for tuning in. You can find the Black Woman Vibes podcast on Facebook page, Black Woman Vibes, Instagram, Black Woman Vibes, Twitter, Black Woman Vibes, YouTube channel, Black Woman Vibes. Please like, follow, and share content. And don't forget to join the tribe of Black Woman Vibes. Also head over to Facebook and Patreon to join the exclusive tribe and get access to content from members of Black Woman Vibes. On Patreon is where we openly have conversations behind the scenes that helps us as sisters grow and level up. Each one teaches us all, from live streams, advisor emails, speaking engagements, and consultation services. All can be found on Black Woman Vibes Patreon and Facebook. Isn't it time for Black women to live and live well? Be the best version of yourself by mastering yourself. I'll be back next Wednesday for a whole new episode. Well, for a continuation of this podcast episode, Black Woman Vibes. With all that being said, be blessed, be enlightened, be loved. I am your hostess with the mostest. So let's get to toasting. VC Nay, logging off. Peace.